to them. All right, joining us, and it looks like, Anne, we just got you online. Maybe you just dropped off the phone. I'll assume that's what that was, and you're welcome to type in the chat box if that was you dropping off the phone. So we've got lots of ways we're connecting people right now. Thanks everybody for joining us. This is the meet and greet webinar for the 2016-17 season. We're really excited to have you all online with us. So thanks for joining. Thanks for taking time out of your day. And it's just a great chance for us to start getting to know each other, a quick introduction, a little bit about the program, and what the next steps are coming. So Janet's reminding folks, if you're connected by phone, make sure you are muted with *6 or a mute button. And we will try and get around to everybody with your audio. And if anybody's having trouble when we get around to introductions, you could type in the chat box. Love to hear your voice. So I'm going to move to our second slide, which is the Blackboard Collaborate screen. And it's just a quick little reminder of what the features are for this platform. We are looking into this platform and others for the rest of this field season. So we might be using this with you when you have your outreach events from the field, and so you'll get to know a lot about Blackboard Collaborate. But again, for everybody who's online now, the top left is the audio video panel with the talk button, and that's how you can talk by clicking it once to speak and clicking again when you're done. And, oops, did someone just join by phone?
Yeah, it's Ann Scheffler again. I might have trouble with the audio.
All right. And make sure you maybe mute your computer because now you've got two connections potentially. All right. So also, when you introduce yourself, you're welcome to use video if you want to. So that button should be available to you. And we've got our chat box, and you can see everybody that is attending as well, and the slides will move in the middle. So a quick overview of our agenda for the webinar. We'll do a quick review of our program, which a lot of you are getting to know quite well at the moment. We'll talk a bit about requirements and the upcoming webinars and orientation. A little about program evaluation, and luckily we have Jen Danielson, part of our evaluation teams, on the phone. So Jen, you're welcome to put some things in there if you'd like. And then we'll get to those introductions where everybody gets a minute to say hello and where you're from, and that question of, well, why did you apply to PolarTREC? Just in a quick snippet, what is it that made you apply this year, so we get an idea of where people are coming from. And then we'll hopefully have some time for questions and answers. We'll try to keep the webinar to about an hour, but in my emails, as mentioning, sort of hour plus, we want to make sure we get everybody introduced in a respectful amount of time, but just so you know, that's what we're in for. So a quick PolarTREC overview, and I'll pause just for a moment and let you know that Janet Warburton is online and on the phone as well. Janet, do you want to just say hello for a sec?
Yep, hello and welcome, and I'm very excited to meet everybody virtually, some of you for the first time. So thanks, Sarah.
Of course, and Janet, you just jump right in if I'm jumping over something that we really need to get out there. Okay, so this is the PolarTREC team. We have Janet and Sarah at the top there as the program managers, and we have a great team behind us working around the clock for PolarTREC teachers, especially when you're in the field. We have a picture of Angela that works with Jen, and then Joed Pauly does video production and some multimedia. You'll probably take lots of pictures when you're out on expedition, and he's the person who helps deal with those and get them into the Internet Media Archive for ARCIS. Julie, who's been all the teachers have been talking to about orientation and getting your flights organized and everything else. She really wanted you to see her kids, so she sent a picture in of them, but you'll meet Julie at orientation. Ronnie Owens is a web developer. You'll hear a lot from him as well at orientation for teachers when we're talking about getting journals up online. And Zeb Pauly was the recipient of your technology questionnaires. He's getting all of that squared away. And for researchers, these folks are available to you as well when you're looking at any of the PolarTREC website for any alterations or changes and edits and questions about how this material is getting out to the world. So this is our big PolarTREC team, and with additional help from the entire staff at ARCIS. And Janet, also, if I'm missing any questions in the chat box, please let me know. And it is a pretty good team. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so support and funding for the PolarTREC 2016-17 season. So you're probably all pretty aware that our major funding is coming from the National Science Foundation, and that is given to ARCUS as an organization, the Arctic Research Consortium, and Janet and I run that project of PolarTREC. So we have multiple projects at ARCUS, and PolarTREC is just one of them. In addition to the National Science Foundation, we have funding from NASA, NOAA, the University of Alaska Fairbanks for some of your particular expeditions. And I think Jan's saying it's 1 year of funding at the moment. We're working on more funding for our future. Yes, so we are working specifically on your field season 2016-17 and hopefully going to get some more funding for additional years. Some other folks we work with, you'll meet Robbie Score at orientation. She is working for CH2M Hill Polar Services on Arctic logistics. A lot of the researchers, you maybe already talked to Robbie or some of her colleagues. So if you have a different CPS representative working with your team, Robbie's probably already in communication with some of those folks like Tom Quinn or other folks. And then the Antarctic logistics support. A name you'll hear a lot is Elaine Hood. She is our particular point of contact with the Antarctic program. But Lockheed Martin holds the contract for all the work that's done through the U.S. down in Antarctica. So those are some names, and you're going to learn a lot more about those at orientation, and some of those are probably pretty familiar to the research teams. Please feel free to let me know I got to slow down or answer some questions. Hope we're doing well. Yes, Janet's mentioning that you'll hear the term USAP, U.S. Antarctic Program for Antarctica as well. And I'm just making sure that the things that are said in the chat box are being relayed to the people on the phone. Now it looks like we have Art joining us. Thanks for joining us. And we're just heading through our quick overview of what the PolarTREC program is, some of those acronyms that we deal with in the polar regions, and folks that work with us. So the PolarTREC program, if you haven't quite figured out yet, is obviously a professional development opportunity for K-12 teachers and others like informal educators that are working with polar researchers in the polar regions for hands-on field experiences. So in our interviews, each researcher and teacher heard about how it's about an 18-month program that allows the teachers and researchers to develop a long-standing relationship over time through field work and pre- and post-field collaborations, all supported by Janet, myself, and the team. So that's what PolarTREC is in a nutshell, but there's so much more. The big crowning jewel of the program is this field experience, the really, really exciting piece, but I have to tell you that is just the beginning. So we're going to prepare teachers and researchers to head out into the field together, potentially for weeks at a time, to learn about polar research, to learn about what it's like to translate that into the education context in a classroom or after school activities. And after that field experience is when it all starts coming together. So in our evaluations, as Jen may be able to mention in a little bit, we gather lots of data and information about what you've been learning and what kind of teaching practices or scientific processes that we're learning or changing that are becoming valuable or more valuable in the classrooms. So these are just some real simple word clouds of things that we're finding out that the PolarTREC experience is offering, that more scientific content to bring into the classrooms, as well as the use of scientific process and methods. I am sure all of you have been using scientific process and methods in the classrooms, but hopefully that's going to shift and change and become more rich for you after experiencing the field work. Oh, all the things we have planned for all of you, Janet says. Another piece about what is PolarTREC, to bring it all home. So you're in the field, you're learning about the scientific research and how it's done, and then bringing that to the classroom. And instructional practices may change. You may shift, and really one of the things that people find is they are using that data from the field in their classrooms and making that science more accessible to students. And we just had somebody join by phone.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. This is Christine.
Hey, Christine. Great to just barely hear your voice. Christine is traveling and lost her voice, but calling in. Thanks, Christine. She's one of our researchers. All right, so we're talking about the goals of PolarTREC and the overview of the program. So I probably won't read all of our goals. They're on the website. You've seen them as you were applying to the program. On the left is the model of our program with that research experience right in the middle, and it's reaching out to the classrooms, to each of you, and to the peers that you will link up with as you're moving through your careers. And did someone else just join by phone?
Yeah, this is Eric.
Hey, Eric. Great to have you join us.
Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're just talking about the overview of the program and the goals. And I believe we are on slide 10 if you happen to be following through the PDF or if you're going to be online.
Okay.
Yeah, so overall our goals are looking at those things that we evaluated that I mentioned earlier, right? So the teacher's scientific content knowledge and the gains met there, the knowledge and use, the use of that knowledge in practices in the classroom, the educational leadership skills earned by teachers and learned through the process, and then we focus on students' understanding and engagement in the polar regions, and that long-term professional development that we're really looking for long past that field experience. So the requirements of how we kind of make all of that magic happen. So we set out with a plan, we have our goals, but how do we know that we're reaching them, and what does it take to implement this in the classrooms and in your careers with broader impacts in the research? So there's a very detailed look at PolarTREC requirements, which I know I've sent out to researchers, I believe to teachers as well, just to kind of take a look at in terms of before, during, and after the expeditions. Some of them are recommendations. Some of them we do expect fulfilled before, during, or after the expedition. There are deliverables from teachers that definitely need the support of the research teams to accomplish, such as the creation of outreach and education planning, implementation into class, so things that are created by teachers but also then reviewed or co-created with the research teams. And I just want to double check too. I heard some beeps. Did we get anybody on the phone just now?
Maybe we lost somebody. Came on, lost somebody.
Okay, and perhaps it was Christine traveling. I'm not sure. Okay, if somebody's just signing onto the phone, feel free to interrupt me. So at orientation, we'll talk a lot more about PolarTREC requirements, but we also will touch on it during the Researchers Only Expectations webinar later this month to really kind of dive in and let researchers know what's expected of the teachers, what's expected of researchers, and what's expected in that co-creation. Where can we support the teachers best to get some of that work done? The education and outreach plan is kind of the meat of those requirements. So we have all these different levels of where we're looking to kind of make impacts through education and outreach with ARCIS. And through PolarTREC, we're starting with that self in the middle. So we're looking at a needs assessment. What does your classroom look like? What are the needs that you have for your career? What are you looking to get out of the program? And what are the needs of your audience so that we know best how to address that as you're going out in the field? And the reflection essay, perhaps obviously comes after the expedition, and it's a chance, sort of a personal / professional reflection, because a lot of times people are really having both those experiences in the field, a personal change and a professional change. So it captures that. It's a really important thing to kind of get on paper before you lose those pieces. And Janet's mentioning too that we have all of this written out in templates and such that provide tools and templates so that you can work through this process. We will go very in-depth at orientation about how you can do all these things and use some models from the past. So working with the research team, so moving out from just our teacher, kind of in teams of 2 or 3 or 4 if you have more folks on the research team, is the networking plan. how is it that it's best to communicate or work together? And that's something that happens before the field. So would you like to be communicating through email? Is it a phone call that really does the trick? When are you most available? Really, even some of those basics, get those out in the open so that there's a clear line of communication. And then talking about where we want to work together, if it's on this piece or this piece, and what's the interest from the researcher or from the teacher, and where can we come together. So we'll work on that at orientation as a start, and then you'll work together on that. In the classroom, we have the implementation strategy. So for a lot of these little requirements, you'll do a pre-expedition version. How might you use this in the classroom? And then when you come back from the field and a year out from your expedition, you've gone back to the classrooms, you're starting to utilize the PolarTREC experience, and we ask you to look back at that implementation strategy and say, what's worked, what's changed, and documenting what it's like to kind of have thought about it ahead of time so that when you're in the field, you know what you're looking for or where you're going with the experience, and then reflecting on that at the end. The lesson plans 1 and 2. In the past, we've had teachers create 2 new original lessons from the work they've done with their research team in the field. And this year we might try something new where we have you create 1 new lesson and then look back at some of the lessons that exist in the PolarTREC library from the past. Do they need updating? Would it be helpful to have the next generation science standards added in? What kind of practices have shifted over time? And so we'll talk more about how that will look when you're there. And Janet's saying, did we mention that most teams are in contact with us for well over a year? It's a really good point. It harkens back to that 18-month commitment where the field is kind of in the middle, but there's so much more happening afterwards. And Janet and I are here year after year to kind of support folks as they're bringing this into their classroom. And now kind of moving out a little bit into the professional realm, we have professional outreach strategies. Again, what would it be like? And before expedition, what does it look like as your strategy to share this with your colleagues and your peers? Teachers will work on that. And then you'll look at that again at the end and say, okay, what did that look like? Where can I strengthen this? What does the research team need as professional outreach? Sort of that back and forth. And the cohort reflection teams is a piece where we're going to have sort of groups of you able to reflect on what my professional outreach and other pieces have looked like. So we're adding that in. And the public outreach and documentation is very similar. How are we reaching the general public with the work that you're doing? So an outreach strategy ahead of time and then afterwards. The public outreach documentation is just a sheet where we're recording. I saw 40 folks at this presentation at this venue, and researchers as well as us at PolarTREC can use that information for their broader impact reports. We need to document that broader impact work is happening, and so we have some of that documentation. And also the STEM experience reports. Right now we're calling those public science reports. They're available on the website, and they're the teachers' chance to kind of take all of this work and make a public document that says, this is what I set out to do, this is what I did in the field, and this is what has come of it. Janet, you want to kind of say what you're thinking there?
Sorry. Karen and she was talking about the review of the lessons being a great idea, and I was saying, that this is kind of a new twist on our 2-lesson requirement that we've had in the past. So some researchers might be aware of that. But instead of creating all new lessons, we're going to ask people to go back, kind of look at the lessons that other teachers have already created, update, revise, and kind of add the new science or the new standards if there are any and things like that. And then I also wanted to say, since we're on the public or the STEM experience report, for the researchers that were with us last year, this is what we were calling the public outreach report or public science report. And it has been very well received by our funders as well as the team. So it's a really nice outreach tool to kind of synthesize the teacher's perspective and their experience. And that's it.
Thanks, Janet. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to zoom through a few more of our requirements just to give everybody kind of that same page look at what we're up to. So phone calls and webinars are another big piece. We're on our first webinar of a few, likely 4, where researchers will participate in the first one, and then the wrap-up one. We'll have 2 more that are one for Arctic folks and one for Antarctic folks, kind of pre and post. And there's phone calls where before heading out in the field, we will get each individual research team, the teacher, logistics providers, and some alumni teachers in on a phone call to talk about all the different pieces of heading out to the field, whether it be the outreach planning or logistics for the flights you're taking to Antarctica, what to pack. All those different pieces are going to be part of the pre-field phone calls, and then a debrief of those very same things when you return. So lots of preparation and lots of post-field work to kind of solidify all the different things. All right, and that did not turn on for the box. I don't know why that looks that way. Sorry about that. My screen is showing the timeline is black. It was all right earlier. Sorry about that. So it's just giving you an idea of all the things we talked about. Just imagine that those little stars are all the things I just mentioned heading into 2017. Bethany, great question. The webinar 4 is going to be a wrap-up that is at the end of all the seasons. We will probably have either a phone call or a webinar for that expectations one that you're thinking about. We actually have never held that webinar before, so it's a new thing we're trying out. We'll figure out what the best platform is for that. It'll likely be a webinar like this one. Good question. All right, well, that slide was not terribly interesting, so sorry about that. Okay, program evaluation is with Angela Larson and Jen Danielson, and kind of leave it at we were collecting all the data from those requirements and all the documentation and the surveys, and we get our reports that are sent off to funders. I think potentially someone on the phone needs to mute their phone. We have some background noise, and it's likely from somebody on the phone. Just mute your phone or press *6 to mute. Okay. That might have done it. Okay. Jen, if you'd like to say anything about the evaluation, do you want to take a second?
Hi, everybody. I'll just say hello and that I'm writing your surveys for next week's orientation, and you'll get those next week before the orientation. So your teachers' first surveys will be coming very soon. But the evaluation data helps us document all the great things you do. So it's really important to get it done.
Thanks, Jen. And so what she was saying is that teachers will receive an email from the Goldstream group. It may come from Jen or SurveyMonkey, and it is a pre-content test. So the researchers submitted questions based on their research. Teachers answer those all before PolarTREC starts and then after to see what the knowledge gain is. So it'll come through your email likely next week. And we'll have that finished before orientation.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one thing about it. So Jen said it's very important. I will stress that it's not very, it's beyond important. It's to the equivalent of, these are our data points for our research project. It's like putting a data buoy out at sea where you've invested a lot of time and money and you're gathering data, and then suddenly it sinks to the bottom or something like that. So this is our data for our research project. So we ask that teachers and researchers please participate in all the aspects of the evaluation, because it's the only way we get data, and data, of course, leads to those bucks. So, and we want to keep it coming. Thanks.
Perfect. All right, so that was a very quick overview of our program and requirements and evaluations. So that's the whole kit and caboodle, but there's so much more to it, and we'll kind of tease out those pieces at orientation and certainly be able to ask questions for researchers on that expectations webinar. So feel free to peruse through the overview, and if, requirements documentation that I've sent out to folks, and we'll answer questions and go deeper into it in a little bit. But now we've got our projects and our participants for this year, and Janet and I are really, really excited. You all know how long this process is of the selection, from applying in July and August and interviews and the final selection. So thank you so much to all of you for that hard work. And you're joining an amazing, amazing legacy of the PolarTREC program. So all of these stars represent at least one expedition that's gone out to the Arctic on this slide. So just kind of imagine yourself as part of this amazing, amazing group. And once you're at orientation and kind of in the field with our PolarTREC teachers, you're really going to feel like you're really becoming part of the PolarTREC family. And that's definitely how we like to think of it. Oh, Janet is really excited, she says in the chat box. Over a decade of expeditions, that is true. Excuse me. So this is the Antarctic side. We've had more Arctic teachers as we've gone along, but we've included Antarctica as of the International Polar Year years. And so again, those stars are representing different expeditions that have gone out. And the ones that are off in the ocean, you can imagine, are the shipboard weekends. People sometimes ask about that. And interestingly, this year we have an expedition that's going to be based out of Chile, so we'll hear a little bit more about that in a bit. So we're going to do some introductions. Oh, good question, Art. What's the difference between the white and yellow stars? The yellow stars are you guys, and so they're kind of just generally all around the continent and through the Arctic. Okay, so we're going to jump into teachers and researchers introductions. We'd love to give you a minute to say your name, your school, or your affiliation, where you're at, where you're calling in from, or where you call home, and then why did you decide to apply to PolarTREC this year? We all have our different kind of motivations, so we can share those. And then researchers, we'll give you an extra minute to talk about your research project. Title, location, and basically like a primary goal of the research, just to give everybody kind of a quick elevator speech of what you are up to in the field. So at this point, we'll use microphones, and folks are welcome to use video to chat, to show themselves if you want. And we're going to start with Stan and then Mike, just to get started. So Stan, do you think you're ready to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Hi, my name is Stan Skynicki, from just outside of Buffalo, New York, where we're currently getting hit with a nice little batch of lake effect snow, over 2+ feet in the last couple of days, which is pretty exciting. I currently work at Cheektowaga Central Middle School and have been there for just over 11 years now. I applied to the PolarTREC program this past year with the opportunity to continue research I was lucky enough to be a part of with Michael Aranti and his crew, studying Arctic ecology in Alaska last summer. So heading to Cherski, Russia this year will be a great extension of that, and being a part of PolarTREC I think will really help me understand how to better use this data and the experiences from the field in the classroom and within the community. Just really excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Stan. And just to give everybody an idea, I used kind of the basic, very basic, quick titles of different research projects. So researchers, feel free to fix that for me. I just kind of grabbed a little piece of what you're up to explain, and then the location where you're headed. So I'll turn it over to Mike Laurenti.
All right, how's it going? My name is Mike Laurenti. I'm at Colgate University outside of Syracuse, New York. I've been at Colgate for about 3.5 years. And as the slide indicates here, I've got a project going on looking at how vegetation and ecosystems influence how air temperature and permafrost temperatures are related. So kind of does vegetation shade the soil, that sort of thing. Does it kind of influence thermal conductivity, those sorts of things. So basically looking at vegetation and permafrost temperatures throughout the Arctic. Stan kind of answered the question a little bit. We've got similar motivations. Was lucky enough to be able to have Stan work with me this year, and we had a really good time in Alaska. And our project work is going to be in northeastern Siberia next year. So PolarTREC seemed like a good way to do that, and probably more importantly, we're kind of interested in, using the PolarTREC resources to really, kind of bring the science into the classroom and do it in a way, so that we're not kind of puttering around and trying to reinvent the wheel. So there's a lot of good experience here. So kind of looking forward to using that. I think that's about it.
Sounds great. Thanks for that. So, so folks know when you applied, you may have seen that there was a pre-existing relationship section of the application. So Stan and Mike have worked together before, and they applied to work together specifically. So thanks so much for that, you guys. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen. And Mike, if you hit the video button one more time, we will say goodbye to you and turn it over to Karen.
Hello, everybody. My name is Karen Beamish, and I am from Albuquerque Academy. I've been teaching at this school for 19 years, teaching Earth System Science as well as biology with an ecology emphasis. My love of science is really all about ecology, and so in the past I have studied the tropical systems, the desert system in which I live, but also I find that the most important thing to teach my students is about climate change, and I believe that the most impact is happening at the poles, so that's why I applied to this program. I felt that bringing my experiences in the polar regions back to my classroom would be the most impactful and important for them to learn about. So I think that's about it, and I'm really excited to be a part of this team.
Thanks, Karen. We'll turn it over to Marguerite.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
My name is Marguerite, and I'm at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. And the title of our project is the Carbon Balance in Warming and Drying Tundra, and the goal of the project is using a manipulative experiment to warm and dry permafrost in the tundra area and evaluate how that impacts the carbon balance of the system. So the idea is as the permafrost, or as the Arctic warms, the permafrost will thaw, and that is likely to change vegetation growth and is also likely to change soil decomposition rates, and we're interested in the relative balance of those two and how that affects the net carbon storage or carbon loss of the ecosystem. And I am really excited to be working with Karen, and I applied to the PolarTREC program because I think outreach is really important, and because I find it really interesting to hear and see how the research that I do is perceived by others and see what the questions are that come up to try and figure out like how people are understanding the science underlying the work that we're doing. And also because some of PolarTREC is a really great infrastructure, like Mike said, so it seems like a really effective way to do outreach.
Great. Thanks for that. And Anne, you are next.
So I'm speaking from the phone, no pictures of me up there. My name is Ann Scheffler, and I have taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science at a Catholic school between Akron and Cleveland for 13 years now. And so I applied to PolarTREC for a few reasons. For one thing, I have a really affluent student body, and my kids travel all over the world, but they go to resorts. They don't ever interact with the culture and the people and the food and all the great things in the places that they go. So partly I just wanted to inspire them to really experience the diversity of the world instead of their own little wealthy bubble. And then I teach outdoor education anyway. That's what I'm talking about at the NSTA, but I want more ideas, the more things I can find to do outdoors and bring the outdoors in is valuable. But then most importantly, I want to help my students and their parents understand climate change, accept that climate change is happening, and to understand that it has an impact on ecological systems, that it's not just about whether or not there's snow and whether or not they have snow days, that it's really systematic and that climate change affects more than just their own lives, more than just mammals, because those are the only things they really think about when they think about the ecosystem, but that there are systemic impacts on animals, plants, insects, microbes, all the things that they kind of discount regularly. And then Christine, as everybody heard for just a minute there, currently has laryngitis. And so she said, introduce if you can. So having read her grant application, she's studying plants and pollinators. We'll be in Greenland, and we'll be looking at plant-pollinator interaction near the glacier, where the glacier is just receding, and then only 40 kilometers away, the temperature, the soil conditions, everything is rather different. And so we'll be looking not only at what insects are doing the pollinating and what their population is, but then whether or not having more diversity in the plant life, because there is more diversity further away from the glacier, whether that impacts the viability of plants that right now are in both ecosystems, to see whether some kinds of plants are going to either bring in more pollinators or bring in fewer pollinators, and therefore negatively affect the plants that exist so far at the fringes of the glacier. So that's it for me.
Great. Good job. Nice job explaining. That was wonderful, and thanks. And Christine, if you're still on, thanks for joining us. We'll let you save your voice. Okay, I'm going to pop over to Ivy. Are you available? Great. We're starting to see you, and hit the talk button so we can hear you.
Okay, I see. I have to hit them both. Cool. Okay, so can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Ivy, and I teach at a public school in Chicago. I'm currently in my 3rd year of teaching. And I teach biology and AP biology to juniors. And the reason that I'm interested in PolarTREC, there's a lot of reasons that I'm interested in PolarTREC. Similar to Anne, I want to make climate change very visceral to my students, and I feel that a huge part of that is going to be through lived experience that is relevant to climate change and bringing that back to my classroom. I think it can be very hard to relate to issues when we're in Chicago, and many of my students have never left Chicago or have only left Chicago a couple of times. So that's a big part of it. The other things that really attracted me to PolarTREC, I don't have a lot of experience with field research, and so I really want to learn how field research can be done to do open inquiry studies with my students. Again, some of my students very rarely leave their neighborhoods and may feel a disconnect with nature. And so finding ways to bring field research into the middle of Chicago is something that I want to figure out how to do, and I feel like PolarTREC is going to give me some ways to think about that.
Thank you, Ivy. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Rose. Did you have a microphone at the moment? And Ivy, just hit the talk button one more time, and you'll be done. That's okay. That's okay. And Rose, are you there? Let me see. Okay. Rose, if you're speaking, I cannot hear you, unfortunately. I see that your microphone is on. And I see that you are typing. Okay, you can type your answer in. Absolutely. And while she's typing, I'll just say that of the 4 teams that we have on the screen, we have not worked with Michael specifically yet as a researcher, though people he's worked with. Same for Marguerite. We've worked with her sort of peripherally, and then she has met some of our PolarTREC teachers in the field where she is. We worked with Christine with one other teacher, and Rose has had a couple of teachers already. For folks that are on the phone, Rose is typing in that she's in Earth Environmental Science at University of Michigan. And still typing. Ask George to explain. I will. That's a great point. I have Rose's application up to PolarTREC, and I'll just say one sentence that comes out of her explanation of what she does. We're studying the role of iron in the conversion of DON to CO2 using field surveys and experiments on soils, streams, rivers, and lakes to test mechanistic hypotheses on these roles of iron in the Alaskan Arctic. So those are Rose. Oh, she says, yeah, that's it. So that's it from what Rose is doing. There's so much more to it. And she calls on George because she works a lot with that other team that's going to introduce themselves shortly. So I'll let George kind of link into that as we move along. But thanks to these first 4 teams, and so another group of folks that are headed to the Arctic. Our top team there starts with Sandra, or Sandy, and a couple other folks involved there. But can I turn it over to Sandy?
No video. I'm having internet problems, so I'll just try with the voice.
No problem.
I'm amazed that I'm going to be a part of this. I teach middle and upper school science at a small independent school on the eastern shore of Virginia. So we're a little strip of land that separates the Chesapeake Bay from the Atlantic Ocean. And probably my 2 biggest reasons that motivated me for applying, one, I've not had very much field experience, and many of my students, as they go away to college, they ask me about field experience. They ask me about research, and I don't have a lot to tell them, so I want to be able to share my experience with them so they have better preparation for when they go away. And also, we live in an area where climate change affects us with every storm that hits. And a lot of times, because we're a rural, kind of isolated area, people don't make the connections about what's happening in the rest of the world with our area. So I want to help my students make those connections and my community make those connections. So I guess bringing research into my classroom, learning more about a field experience and all that that entails, just kind of bringing what happens around the globe to our local area were the big parts that influenced my application.
Thanks, Sandy. That's great. And Katrin, do we have you?
Hi, yes. This is actually both Katrin and Sarah together. We're huddling around my laptop here. Russ couldn't make it today, but he's with us in spirit, I guess. And so we are part of the 3 of the PIs for the so-called Chukchi Borderland project, and the Chukchi Borderland is very northern part of the Chukchi Sea in the Arctic, and it's going to be an interdisciplinary research cruise that we do there, and we will work on sea ice, on the water column, and on the seafloor. And we will use a number of different tools to look at the overall diversity in this region. And so among others, we use some traditional tools like grabs and trawls and nets, but we also have an ROV. And so that should be very exciting and hopefully give some good imagery. And the goal of the project is to go to an area that is where we know very little about because it's quite remote, And so it's really an exploration project, but it's an area that's very much influenced by climate change and oceanographic changes. And so understanding what's there now and how that might change in the future is a goal of this project. You want to talk a little bit about why we have a PolarTREC teacher? Okay, well, and we applied for PolarTREC because we figured that this would be an interesting project for a lot of students, but I think our ability to connect to that particular group is fairly limited, and so having a PolarTREC teacher with us who has those connections and just is really better than we are at communicating the science is going to be really good for us.
Thank you, ladies. That was great. And for the teachers that are coming to orientation, you may be able to meet those two because they are here in Fairbanks. So hopefully we'll be able to catch up. I'm going to pass it on to DJ.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. So my name's DJ. I run 3 large STEM programs through the University of Southern California, so through USC. I have a K-3 program that runs after school in about 5 schools, and we rotate through different fields of science, and then we have a scientist come in and talk. This upcoming spring semester, we're going to be doing aerospace engineering, electrical engineering, anatomy, and game design, and EA Games is providing the speakers for the game design unit, which is awesome. I have a 4th and 5th grade program called the Young Scientist Program. We work with about 50 local 4th and 5th grade teachers in the LA area, and I teach USC students how to teach science, and then I send them out to all of these 50 classrooms. We also do teacher PD and after-school workshops, but those are grant dependent. And then I run the STEM part of a much larger umbrella program called the Neighborhood Academic Initiative, and it's a 7-year college prep program for low-income youth. And it's all-encompassing. It starts in 6th grade, and it's anything that the student would ever need to get into college: after-school tutoring, Saturday school, summer classes, SAT prep classes. The list continues on, lab experience, STEM experience, et cetera, et cetera. And if they complete the program and get into USC, they get free tuition. And so we get about 20 of our students. There's about 1,000 students in that program, and we get about 20 of them into USC on a yearly basis. And for those of you that aren't aware, USC is about $200,000 per student at the moment, and so it's a decent chunk that we are covering. All of the programs are focused on low-income students and underrepresented students in science for the surrounding community around the university. Sorry, that was a really long mouthful.
Yeah, that was great, DJ. Thanks for that. And you want to add one quick thing about why you want to do PolarTREC?
I do. You know, through all these programs, I definitely feel like I'm training the next generation of scientists, and I think to be a scientist is to understand data and seeing real sets of data, connecting to data, or best comes to best, actually creating data that could contribute to something and connecting to the issues of our time, like climate change, connecting to current research, or seeing what's actually happening in different science fields is very important. And I agree with what Sandra said. You know, promoting field work I think is so important for our students, and you know, I think as teachers, setting an example of, like, you know, we practice what we preach to you.
Thanks, DJ. And George, do you have a microphone yet? I'm not clear on that. Okay, it looks like you're able to hit the talk button, but I don't hear you speaking. Are you talking? Okay, unfortunately, I'm not able to hear your voice. But I do also have your application for PolarTREC up. Someone else can come back to you. Will do, George. You may be able to do the audio wizard. That might help if you haven't tried that yet. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. So if you hit the, oops, wait. I saw somebody. Let's see. But I'm not hearing your voice. So hit the talk button again. See if the wizard works if you haven't tried that yet, and I will definitely come back to you. I'm gonna just turn your microphone off real quick, and we'll jump to the next page. But George, you just type in the chat box when you might be able to come back, and I'll keep your application up so I can say a sentence or two on your behalf if it doesn't work. But we'll go through this next slide and then come back to you. Okay, how about Rebecca? I believe you're on the phone. Is that right?
Okay, so let's try this. I just hit the video button, so maybe you'll be able to see me, and can you hear me through the phone okay?
Sounds great. Go right ahead.
Hey, awesome. I'm Rebecca Himshoot. I teach 2nd through 5th grade science at Pete Duchesne Elementary School in Sitka, Alaska. I'm super excited to be participating in PolarTREC. I think some of the reasons I applied is I've met some of the past teachers who have participated, and I've seen the work that they've done, some of the lesson plans they've written, and they're all just uniformly excellent, so I want to join that group. And I think anytime that you do real science, that you're actually out, so to speak, doing science in quotes, you're not going to lose ground doing that, and it brings the experience home to students, and they can see that science is a real thing that we do, not just something that happens in the classroom. So I'm really excited to go and, so to speak, do science. And then Alaska is my playground, so I'm really happy to be here in Alaska, and I see climate change on the ground every single day. It can't be missed in the environment around here. And whenever I go north, it's especially visible. So knowing more about it and bringing that to my students in whatever way I can without scaring them. Again, I teach elementary, so I want to be appropriate in what I teach them. I'm looking forward to developing a relationship with my researchers and bringing things home for my students.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I don't believe we have Michelle online, but I know we do have Becky. So Becky, do you want to say a little bit about your project?
Sure. Is that working? Okay. Hi there, I'm Becky Hewitt. I'm a postdoc with Michelle Mack, and I'll be working on the grounds with Rebecca. We're really excited to have her with us at Tuluk and in Healy up in Alaska this summer. The idea behind our project is that as permafrost soils warm and decomposition occurs, there can be a flush of nitrogen that becomes available and is potentially available to plants. And if plants can acquire that nitrogen, then that can stimulate their growth or shift the vegetation community. And so we're really interested in what rooting traits and what plant fungal symbioses might confer access to that new and novel source of nitrogen. So this summer we'll be digging around quite a bit and harvesting a lot of root systems and eventually characterizing their fungal symbionts as well. And Michelle has been involved with the PolarTREC program in the past. This is my first year being involved with it, but I'm really excited to be working with a teacher and just sort of the iterative process of communicating my perspective on our scientific inquiry and getting sort of the outside perspective on our research questions and our approach and seeing the best way to communicate our science to especially a younger group of students. And if we can walk away from this with young students being interested in below ground processes, I'll think it's a huge success. So pretty excited to be involved.
Thanks, Becky. That was perfect. All right, we're going to jump to Kelly McCarthy. She's one of two teachers that are working with John Woods, and so I'll turn it over to Kelly to talk about herself. And Kelly, you're welcome to talk about the Ice Bridge project because we did not get John online this evening, but I can do that as well. Either way, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kelly McCarthy. I work at a Catholic school called Our Lady of Lourdes Regional, and we're in Cole Township, Pennsylvania, so the Cole region of central PA. Small school, fairly rural area. I teach physics, environmental science, 8th grade science, and a few math classes. I also run some after-school programs in STEM, including rocketry, astronomy, and robotics. So that's a whole lot of fun. The reason that I applied to PolarTREC, well, one of the reasons is kind of that whole idea of bringing an authentic experience back to the classroom and seeing how motivated and excited my students get. I think it's very important for them to see their teachers kind of going out and getting excited about learning and collecting data and finding out information that I didn't know before, so that hopefully that will motivate them when they're working on a research project or working on a lab to kind of go all in and explore and see what they can find out and come up with the big questions and feel comfortable and confident going out and answering them. I also was excited to apply because some of my students already had some experience meeting the team that I will be working with this year. We had an online chat last year through something called Mission Tool Suite for Education, and some of my 8th grade students got to chat back and forth with the IceBridge team while they were in the air. So through that process, I learned a lot about the polar regions and the research going on, and I just wanted to learn more. And my kids did too, so we're kind of all in this stage of just wanting more information, wanting to find new content out. And I want to be able to better explore that with them in the classroom. So I think by going through the field experience in PolarTREC, I'll be better equipped to come back and teach them about things like climate change, as well as the whole process of a field study, whether we're in physics class or environmental science class. To talk about I can talk about Operation IceBridge, and if I miss something, you can throw it in, Sarah, if you think of something I missed. I think
no problem. You've had so much great communication with your team, so I think you've got it. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the idea, well, the field experience for Operation IceBridge takes place mostly on a plane. So we have an old military plane that's transformed into a lab, and we'll fly out of Kangerlussuaq, Greenland, and we'll either be flying over land ice, over Greenland's ice sheet, or over sea ice. And I'm not sure yet which part of the mission I will be a part of. And basically every year they travel these same paths in their plane, which is equipped with LiDAR and radar that helps measure the thickness and the topography of the ice along these same paths, so that from year to year, if they're flying over the same path, they can eventually, all the stuff will go in one huge database, and they can kind of track changes year after year after year on the same path. And it's kind of cool too, because there was a satellite called IceSat, and there will be a satellite called IceSat-2, which follow some of the same paths. So they might be following their plane-based path, or they might be trying to check one of the satellite paths just to verify data. So they're covering for 8 hours a day a whole section of land that they had done exactly the same the year before, so that they can just keep tracking thickness. So they're kind of just measuring the changing ice sheet. That's the goal.
Great job, Kelly. And my apologies, I put you on the spot, but John is here. We've got 2 researchers with Woods as their name. So my apologies, Kelly. I think you get an A+. John, what do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kelly has this, and we've been in pretty good communication already, and we're excited. She summed it up great. And just to add on that, we are one of the largest NASA airborne science missions, and longest running, that's for sure. This is our 7th year flying over both poles. So we're really excited to have Kelly on board. This is our 4th year having a PolarTREC teacher, so we're looking to get that back on track, and we're really excited to be part of this team.
Thanks so much, John. That was great. So I am going to jump back. Sounds like George may have worked out his mic. George, do we have
I'm talking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Great to hear your voice. Please give us a minute elevator speech of your research.
Okay. So I'm talking for myself and for Byron Crump, who can't be here on the call. And I think Byron and Rose Corey and I have all worked together before at Toolik Lake with PolarTREC. And the reason we applied again this year on 2 different projects is because it was so successful and PolarTREC is such a great program. We really believe that it's the best program out there to help scientists to really do this job, this important job of outreach, better than we can do it without teachers, and also to reach not only the public but young scientists and young students as well. So that's why we're involved in this. Our project is looking at microbes in fresh waters and also in soils, and the real take-home message of our project to especially to teachers and students is that microbes play an enormously important role in driving climate change. Specifically, we want to make clear the link between the greenhouse gases, CO2 and methane in the atmosphere that people hear about as causing global warming, and the role of microbes in producing them. So about half of all the CO2 put into the atmosphere each year comes from microbes. And our goal is to have people understand how this fits into the overall global carbon cycle and how bacteria affect the rise in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. One of the things we're most interested in right now is seeing how the thawing permafrost, because of warming temperatures in the Arctic, will affect this release of greenhouse gases. And I think both Rose's project and our project are working together to try to understand that better.
Thank you so much, George, and I'm glad we got to hear it straight from you about your work. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to jump past the slide we just worked through of our group going to the Arctic, and we're going to start talking about heading to Antarctica. And as we're going through, folks who've already spoken and folks who are here to, still to come, I think we're finding a lot of overlap in all the different projects. So if you see something that's overlapping in the science content for teachers, make a note of that and you'll be able to connect further at orientation about the different overlapping projects. And researchers, when you're hearing about what these teachers are wanting or why they're applying, you may be hearing a new perspective that you maybe didn't see in the applications you reviewed and something you'd want to bring into the experience you'll have with your teacher. So that's why we're getting a chance so everybody can hear all the different aspects of why we're working through the PolarTREC program. So we're heading to Antarctica now. We have a couple more groups here, so I'll start with Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi everyone. My name is Kate Miller. I teach in Arlington, Virginia. I teach high school physics, both a general physics class and then IB or International Baccalaureate Physics. I'm in my 3rd year of teaching right now, and I'm looking forward to working on IceCube because I teach particle physics, so to kind of get the cutting edge research perspective on a topic I actually teach, but also to bring engineering practices into my classroom and trying to allow students to develop their own science identity, to really embody what it means to be a scientist in the context of a high school physics class. I'm particularly interested in bringing underrepresented groups into physics. I have done research in the past around gender, specifically the underrepresentation of women in physics. So I'm looking forward to the outreach component, both for my students and the public in general.
Thanks, Kate. And Jim Madsen is actually deployed right now in Antarctica, so we don't have him online. The IceCube project is a pretty popular, pretty famous, if you will, project that's getting a lot of attention right now. And Kate kind of alluded to what the work is, but I'll just say the IceCube is located at South Pole and records the interactions of nearly massless subatomic messenger particles called neutrinos. You've probably heard of the IceCube telescope, and we'll hear a lot more about it from this team. And I'm going to pass it over to Eric. Thanks for joining us. Are you able to use a microphone? Or you're on the phone, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
My name's Eric Fuma. I've been teaching, going on 20 years now. I teach physics, AP physics and astronomy at Rochester High School in Rochester, Michigan, which is about 30 miles outside of Detroit. I also teach some astronomy at Macomb Community College, which is a local community college. I think I probably applied for PolarTREC because well, I think that there's a lot of very important science going on at the poles that maybe not a lot of kids know about. So I kind of wanted to get involved in sharing that with them. And also, you know, I wanted to kind of demonstrate to kids not only modeling field work, but, you know, letting the kids know that physics doesn't always just happen in a lab or you know, stuffy old room somewhere. That sometimes it happens in the field, and you know, and emphasize that that science can be an adventure. And I think that's really kind of what drew me to it.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And there you have another smiling photo of Jim Madsen also working on this project. And this is just a little bit different from the neutrino project. They're working out of McMurdo. The neutron monitoring project that they're doing is the longest continually running experiment in Antarctica. The neutron monitors are used to study the sun, which occasionally undergoes solar storms that produce bursts of energetic particles. We're interested in learning more about the energy range and abundance of the particles produced in these events, which are important for understanding how to protect electronics and electrical grid from extreme space weather events. Pretty exciting stuff going on with Jim, and Jim's worked with us for many, many years. He, if you're interested in talking to sort of a mentor researcher, we have a few on this call. So we've got Jim, Rose, George, many folks who've worked with us for years. So any researchers who are interested in kind of connecting with somebody who's worked with us for years, please reach out and we'll try and connect you to that.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt real quick that Jim is actually in Antarctica right now and on this project, and you can follow along on the PolarTREC website if you want to see what he's doing with this project right now.
Cool, thanks. All right, turn it over to Timothy Dwyer.
Hi, I'm Tim, and I teach at Spring Street International School in Friday Harbor, Washington, which is in the San Juan Islands, right up on the Canadian border in the Pacific Northwest. And I teach environmental science and biology, chemistry, and algebra. And so what actually attracted me to PolarTREC was out here in Friday Harbor, we're lucky enough to have a field station of the University of Washington, and I do some volunteering with them, and I'm able to bring my kids onto that campus quite often. And so I'm all about getting my kids to understand that scientists are not, you know, sort of hiding in a lab all of the time, wearing lab coats. And I'm also really interested in getting them to see the actual processes in science. And so on the pier last summer, I ran into Art Woods, who had a project going on in Antarctica, and I asked him if he knew about anything about any teacher opportunities. And so that's sort of how our relationship got started. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, you should look into this program. And so I looked into PolarTREC, and it actually it seemed like a fantastic way for me to broaden my own horizons, not just looking at biology in the Pacific Northwest, but looking at the impacts of potential climate change in a part of the world that I'm unlikely to get to, that some of our kids aren't likely to get to, but also that drives a big part of global weather. So yeah, that's my motivation. I'm excited to be working on the looking at sea spiders with Art and Brett and Amy.
Thanks so much. And Art, are you available?
Can you hear me now?
All right, perfect.
I'm Art Woods. I am at the University of Montana in Missoula, and I've got a project going in Antarctica with Brett Tobolsky and Amy Moran. We did our first field season this last fall in October and November, and we're interested in a biogeographic pattern that's really widespread across the world, and it's very sort of strange and mysterious, and it's called polar gigantism. And the basic observation is that a lot of marine invertebrate taxa evolved to strangely large body sizes in the Arctic and in the Antarctic. And so we're going to McMurdo studying that process of gigantism, and we're interested in the physiology of gigantism and the biomechanics of gigantism. So essentially, how and why can marine invertebrates become so large? And we're studying a kind of poster kid for this process, a taxon called sea spiders, which are not real spiders, but they evolved to be enormous in the Antarctic like this, whereas everywhere else in the world they're very small. We're just delighted to be involved with PolarTREC. This is my first year to be a PolarTREC researcher. Really psyched to have Tim Dwyer on the project. We're really interested in education and outreach, and I do a lot of that locally, but I feel like I need a sort of new injection of energy and sort of different ways of thinking about outreach to younger kids, and so it's going to be perfect to interface with Tim and the rest of the program on this. What Tim also didn't say is that when we met, it was about scuba diving in Washington State, and he's a super experienced scuba diver, more experienced than the rest of us all combined, so he's going to be a big help on that front in the Antarctic. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Art. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so our group that's also heading to Antarctica, we have Josh. Josh, are you available?
Hi, I'm Josh Heward. I'm at Timpanogos High School in Orem, Utah, which is about 40 miles south of Salt Lake City. And I teach AP Biology, Biotechnology, and Zoology. And I applied to PolarTREC primarily because I'm looking for more ways to involve my students in authentic research experiences. And the little bit I've been able to do that in the past, I found that it's really beneficial for me as a teacher and especially for my students to learn more about the nature of science and to understand more science processes in a more authentic setting. And I believe Byron's in the field, I think, so he's not here on the project.
Can you explain the work?
Yeah, so we're going to be working in the dry valleys, the McMurdo dry valleys, or the dry valleys of Antarctica around McMurdo Station, and his team primarily studies soil ecology. They're looking at environmental change and the impact that has on soil invertebrates, and it's sort of an ideal place to study some of those relationships because the food web there is very simple. You have invertebrate grazers and essentially no predators. There are a handful of, well, a couple of predatory species, but primarily it's just the grazers and then the microbes that they're feeding on. And so it's an interesting place to study nutrient cycling and community relationships because of the simplicity of the system.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. And we're going to turn it over to Kara. Are you available?
All right. There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Pekarsik. I am calling in from Weymouth, Massachusetts, which is just south of Boston. I work at North Quincy High School, and I teach biology, and this year I'm teaching zoology and marine science. I have applied to PolarTREC quite a few times for many of the reasons that have already been given today. I certainly am interested in bringing current, up-to-date science into my classroom. I'm interested in showing my students that science doesn't have to be just what they see on TV in a local area, that there are remote locations that are learning a great deal about science and climate change. And one of the reasons, the other reason that I applied to PolarTREC is for what we're doing right now, which is collaboration. I don't have a lot of peers at my school who have experience in field-based research, and my background was in some field-based research, and so I'm really looking forward to meeting and communicating with and hopefully keeping in contact with fellow teachers and also researchers who can keep me up to date on current science. As you all know, we teach the standards, and every year that kind of seems to be the same thing over and over again. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to learn about current research that's going on, and this webinar has already got me really excited about that. So that's my main reason.
Great, and I believe we have all three folks from your team on here. So Bethany, I'll let you introduce yourself first. Maybe you could talk about the project, and maybe Drew and Kristen can share their thoughts on sort of why y'all applied as a team. Maybe that'll spread things out and give y'all a chance to say something. Bethany, you want to start? And Bethany, if you're speaking, just hit the top button.
Okay, there I am. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be part of this project, and I'll let Kristen and Drew talk a little bit more about our collective, collaborative excitement about including a teacher. But our project is really looking at the interplay of ocean chemistry, really important primary producers known as diatoms in the Southern Ocean, and how bacteria that live in association with them may help them overcome the challenge of low iron in that ocean environment. So we're going to be sampling aboard a ship off the Antarctic Peninsula, and I also have quite a few students in my laboratory supported on this grant who are from Massachusetts. So they're very excited to be working with Kara's students. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thanks, Bethany. Drew, are you there?
Yeah, okay, looks like it worked. Hi, I'm Drew Chappell. I was Bethany's postdoc, and I'm now at Old Dominion University. And we were really excited when Bethany learned about the opportunity of PolarTREC to bring a teacher with us to help with the outreach, to help with getting our communication of our science to students, and I'm also from Massachusetts, so I go back there because my father is there. So I was excited about the option of a teacher that I might actually be able to interact with when going up to the Northeast. So we're really excited about having Kara with us, and we've already had some great conversations with her.
Thanks, Drew. And Kristen?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, I'm Kristen Buck, and I'm a chemical oceanographer in this group, and I'll be measuring the chemistry of iron in our incubation experiments and samples. And I kind of second what these guys have said about the project and our interest in having a teacher. We're really excited, and I can say that as a chemist, I'm always really looking at ways to translate the work that I'm doing to broader audiences. And so I'm really excited about getting some insight from a professional on that. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for your team this evening. And our last group of teachers headed to Antarctica. We've got two groups. So Maggie, I believe we've got you online, right? Are you available?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
Can you see me? All right, there we are. Yeah, so I'm Maggie, and I live in Leadville, Colorado, way up high in the mountains, and work at Leadville High School, Lake County High School. And so after about 18 years of teaching science, I decided to work with teachers. So I'm instructional coaching and academic coaching at my school, which gives me lots and lots of access to wonderful classrooms and students. So I'm in all the classrooms all the time, so it's a lot of fun. And I went to the Arctic 10 years ago with PolarTREC, so I'm a repeater. And I think I just am so excited to meet all these new teachers because what they have ahead for them is just absolutely amazing, life-changing experience. So after about 10 years of sharing that experience, I felt like I needed a new infusion. So I decided to apply to go to Antarctica and or to go on another adventure, and I get to go to Antarctica with John and the team to be based out of Punta Arenas in Chile and fly over. So really, really excited about this opportunity to bring this study and this science and data back to my teachers.
Thanks, Maggie. So as a reminder to teachers, or as mentioned a little bit in emails, but we will have some alumni at orientation, alumni teachers that are there to help you kind of learn the technology, bounce ideas about outreach off you. And Maggie's going to be one of those folks also heading out, so she's kind of got a dual role at orientation coming up. John, would you like to comment a little bit on this expedition?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, we study both poles as part of Operation Ice Bridge, and this is going to be our southern campaign based out of Punta Arenas. And right now we're actually looking at different aircraft options. So we might be on the NASA DC-8 or possibly on the NCAR G5. So either way, flying over Antarctica is a pretty thrilling experience, and we're excited to have Maggie and the PolarTREC as part of the team.
Thanks, John. And I see Bethany's question down there. John, do you want to fly over our expedition? So these are pretty neat connections being made. So in the chat box for folks that are on the phone, and I'll read some of those out in a bit. But our last team to present this evening is David. Do you want to start?
Sure. All right. So I'm David Kiesinger. I'm actually below Maggie. I'm down in Boulder, Colorado. I've been teaching now for 16 some odd years, from Boston to New York to Los Angeles to Chicago, and now out here. I teach middle school science. I have for all 16 years. That makes me either insane or slightly off balance, one of the two. With my 8th graders, I also taught high school and college level, but middle school is always where I end up actually going back to. I actually used to live in Fairbanks, so I'm going back home for a little while, so that'll be nice. Lived there for 7 years, and that's part of the reason why I decided to actually apply for PolarTREC. I got my degree in geophysics from University of Alaska Fairbanks a long time ago. And my original idea was to actually study glaciology. So now going back down with Lynn and George, it'll be fun to go down to Antarctica and work on glaciers down that side of the world.
Thanks, David. Great. And welcome home in February. And Lynn, do you want to explain the project?
Great, sure. So first I'll just do a brief introduction of myself. And I'm also talking for Gordon today. He couldn't make this webinar. But so my name's Lynn, and I'm from the University of Maine. I did my undergraduate degree in physics, and now I'm working towards a PhD, sort of in the area of glaciology. And I'm really excited about our project, and that we're actually going to have a teacher with us this round. So our project title is the Flow and Fracture Dynamics, and it's specifically we're studying the Ross Ice Shelf. So our field site is about 50 kilometers from McMurdo Station, and so we're studying an area that's intensely crevassed. It's an area between two ice shelves. So when faster flowing ice comes in contact with slower moving ice, the ice shelf kind of breaks apart and creates these crevasses. But they're all buried. So in order to study them, we use a combination of both GPS observations and ground penetrating radar observations. And so our main goal is basically to establish inferences about the future stability of the ice shelf, whether or not the crevasse pattern is changing, what that means for the stress pattern for the Ross ice shelf, and whether or not it's going to be stable in the coming century, and what we can kind of figure out about its boundary conditions. So that's about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that. All right, folks, so those are all of the teams and a couple of the connections being made in the chat box were related to geography, where people live, or where they're studying, or where they're working, and folks are able to kind of connect across our different teams because they're in similar areas. We had a couple of texts going through about different research projects or grants that folks are applying to that might have different relationships between the teachers and researchers of various teams, and lots of folks talking about how they're teaching at different or at similar grade levels. So that was exciting to see lots of emails being thrown back and forth. So thanks so much for starting exactly what we are trying to go for, which is all of this cross-disciplinary and cross-community collaboration. All right, so really quick, I am going to go through these last few slides. Everybody does have them available in the PDF, so I won't dwell on them too much. Again, the support staff being Janet and Sarah. Janet, are you still online?
I sure am. I'm so excited.
Good. Okay. So Janet is down in Anchorage actually, and I live in Denali Park, but we will both be in Fairbanks to meet you teachers in Fairbanks in February. So additionally, I mentioned Elaine Hood and Robbie Score earlier, some of our logistics folks, so there's a picture of them. And closing thoughts and next steps from us, how to succeed, communicate, be flexible, research comes first, make safe sacrifices to meet goals, and bring your unique skills to the team. Teachers will hear more about each of these pieces at orientation, about what it means to be flexible, but staying focused on the work, about the research, but how to balance that research and outreach workload that you'll have in the field and afterwards. And then we'll do a lot of training on keeping you safe in the field. We'll be talking to logistics folks at their offices in Fairbanks. So researchers will tell you more about that when we speak with you later in the month. And bringing your unique skills. That's some of the best parts of your applications are what are your unique aspects about you that bring what you're bringing to the field season. And I love when people are talking about their humor, their way of bringing teams together. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make the field experience incredibly, incredibly successful. For being yourself, that positive attitude. So I can tell we've got a great group this year. Let's see, real quick, the hopes from the National Science Foundation and other partners for PolarTREC is the integration of research and education, as all of you have just mentioned. It's like a pop quiz, and you answered all the right answers here of why you want to do PolarTREC. Conveying that research experience to classrooms, developing that database and scientific inquiry-based activities for students, working on those long-term relationships, professional development not only for the teachers but for the researchers as well, and improving the outreach and broader impacts in education for research that's supported by tax dollars in the U.S. here. Research done in other countries, but U.S.-funded research projects. So that's, I think we're hitting the nail on the head here for hopes from the National Science Foundation for why we do have this program. One last reminder to folks that we do offer travel support for teams to start collaborating right now. We really, really encourage, if not require, teams to get together pre-field. So it might be a visit to the classrooms by the research team, or having a teacher visit the institution or labs where you're working to get a handle on what's happening already and where they're going to fit into that project. So please think about making a weekend or a weekday, some sort of couple of days to get together, one of the two places, and let us know. We have a couple of teams already taking advantage of this, and by far and away it's one of the most powerful pieces of the program, so we really encourage it. I think what we'll do, because we've run about an hour and a half, which is pretty good for getting through nearly 40 folks talking about their projects and their aspirations, I might leave questions to the chat box if you'd like to ask there. Is there anyone who has a burning question that needs to be asked out loud? I'll just let you open your microphone if you do have a really important question you need to ask. All right, maybe I scared you in saying that it's late in the evening. But we are here to answer all those questions at all hours, weekends. You know, we're kind of checking email and staying in tune. So let us know what you need. And thank you so much for participating. And I'm going to, Janet, go ahead. I'll pause. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to remind people that if you had a colleague or you want to review this webinar, we do archive them all. So we'll produce the archive and send a link out to everybody. So if there's somebody that can join and you think, oh, they should take a look at it, that'll be available in a couple of days.
Absolutely. And for folks that are emailing, it'd be best if you can connect Janet and I together on an email in case I'm out of the office where she is. We're able to get back to you right away and keep us both in the loop on all that you're doing. So we might remind you once or twice to keep us both in the loop. But thanks to people who are working hard, connected on our Facebook group for alumni and current participants. And we will be connecting lots more with all of you teachers in email and then at orientation. And researchers will be excited to talk with you more and answer your individual questions on the 28th of January, and I'll send a reminder out for that. So thanks to everybody. Folks in the chat box are just saying, yay, I'm excited. This will be great. I'm really inspired. Thanks for putting this together, that kind of thing. So we're really excited, if you can tell. I cannot wait to have you all as new friends up here in Fairbanks. And researchers will see each other at meetings and around. So thanks, and have a great rest of your evening.
Yep. Thank you all. Thanks, Sarah.